All right, welcome everybody to the Two Fun Guys podcast, and thank you, Toby Pasman, for coming in. Yeah. So you are an applied neuroscientist. I'm really excited to talk to you because I'm fascinated by brains. I know Brent is too. We talk about brains all the time. I actually have a brain tattoo right here on my arm.
Yep.
And so you have some really cool technology that you work with, but you've also been able to work and optimize people who are really high level, celebrities, athletes, UFC fighters, things like that. So I'm really excited to dive into this, but I'd love to hear a little bit more from you, exactly what you're doing with people and really why you're qualified. You've obviously done some amazing things. So kind of pimp yourself out a little bit in terms of like your accolades.
For sure, man. Yeah, I guess in terms of like, I kind of take a very different approach than what, traditionally like psychiatry or mental health treatment when it comes to people thinking about optimizing their brain or just getting help for their brain. Because I don't think we really think about oftentimes optimizing our brain, or maybe we try some nootropics we see online, but the whole field of mental health and psychiatry is very archaic. It's a subjective kind of symptom-based, you get put in a diagnosis, you get labeled, you get a medication or medications, and off you go. So I kind of experienced that same thing growing up in terms of my own social anxiety, and kind of went through that system and kind of realized like there has to be a better way. And that was really like my discovery in terms of like understanding neuroplasticity.
What were the struggles you were experiencing when you had?
Oh man, I was super awkward, like always super shy, introverted. I was always the intelligent, shy kid in class, but I could barely talk to another dude in the class, let alone the pretty girl. So I was like, did well academically, really well academically throughout middle school, high school, college, but socially, I always really struggled. And there was always this barrier that was sort of like up between myself and other people, where I felt this internal like sense of shame or anxiety whenever I was kind of interacting with people. And one big component of that was like my verbal fluency was really bad. I would be in front of someone like trying to have a conversation, and just my mind would go blank. All of the word, like I couldn't express
the
myself.
Word is on the tip of your tongue, but you can't say it.
And like all the time. Yeah. Like I just couldn't communicate because it was like my anxiety was like preventing me from being able to actually like think through what I was trying to say. And then it was this looping cycle.
I used to get bad social anxiety. I remember sometimes I get so nervous ordering coffee that I would be preparing what I was going to say word for word. And I don't know why I would get so nervous.
Right.
I would like, and I get up there and sometimes I literally just go blank.
Yep.
Right.
Dude, that's
even happens during podcasts sometimes. I'm just like, bloop.
That's exactly it. It sounds crazy, but it's like I scripted out everything. Like literally everything I was going to say, I had it in my head prior to saying it. So I came off very robotic and awkward.
That's so funny hearing that this is social anxiety, because I did the same shit and I just thought that's people. I thought this is just how you are.
There's definitely a connection, I feel like, between like intelligence, like where it's like we're overthinking things, right? And like social anxiety.
Oh, he's calling you smart. Yeah. Thank you, Toby.
I definitely am.
That never happens on this podcast, so thank you.
No, I mean, I feel like it's like the deeper you think about things, the more you think, it's like the more you realize there's so many different ways to like think about different situations. I feel like sometimes it'd be a lot simpler and easier if you're just, I don't know, just there wasn't much going on in your head and you're just...
Ignorance is bliss, right?
To some degree, maybe. Yeah.
Or too much analysis on like how the interaction's going to go, or...
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Thinking about everything. So you moved out of social anxiety. How?
So it was a combination of the neurotechnology and some psychedelic experiences. Starting with like the neurotechnology, I was in a research lab in college because I was like fascinated by the brain, but more so on like a biological level. Psychology was cool. The theoretical aspect of it was a little bit dissuading. Like I more preferred like the actual hard science, the data of being able to understand like how our brains are actually functioning on a chemical and electrical level. So that's what led me into doing the research lab at my college, where I was actually putting the EEG caps on people, learning how to analyze and acquire the brain scan data. And that lab was called the the project, it was called the Emotions and Neuroplasticity Project. So basically assessing how our brain responds and changes, as the result of like experiencing different emotions, both positive and negative, looking at how gratitude impacts the brain, positive thinking. So it was like super cool, the research experience. But then at that point, I was also able to scan my own brain. And that's when things really clicked, because I was able to see that an area of my left frontal lobe, this location called Broca's area in the brain, and that area is really crucial for our verbal fluency. And that area was specifically really low in activity in my brain. So that was really the realization of understanding, okay, well, for one, my brain's plastic. So I used to think that's just who I was. That was like my identity, was just being socially anxious and awkward. But having that realization of, okay, my brain is actually plastic, I can change my brain, and then understanding, okay, this specific area of my brain just isn't functioning well on a biological level. And instead, it's like not a moral failing. It's not something me as a person. It's like literally something tangible that can actually be quantified and then could actually be changed, like with the neurotechnologies that I started working with. Some psychedelic experiences.
Yeah, you got to tell us about those.
Yeah.
This is the Two Fun Guys podcast.
Yeah, we got to talk about all
dive
that.
into those.
Yeah. So first time, or actually like second time taking MDMA, I had like the craziest mystical experience that like blew my mind away. I was like in the process of like, at the time I had come to Florida to work at this rehab clinic to get mentored by Dr. Nicholas Dogris, who's got like 3 decades of experience in neurofeedback and brain mapping, these technologies I work with. So he's like one of the goats within the field. So it's like, I got to come to Florida, get mentored by this guy. And around that time, like my first buddy in Florida, this plastic surgeon buddy of mine, he definitely lived by the work hard, play hard, sort of lifestyle. And so one night we're out. I don't know if have you guys partied much in Miami?
A little bit.
11?
Yeah.
You've been to 11? Okay. So he's like, yo, dude, like we're got a big group of people, like we're going to go to 11 tonight. So ended up basically being this experience where I took MDMA. The first time was great. Like we just partied. It was cool. But then they had this beautiful mansion on the Venetian Islands that they'd rented out, like these islands off of Miami. They'd rented out this multi-million-dollar mansion where they're just partying there for the whole weekend.
Damn.
I'm like this, I'm 21 at the time. So like all of this stuff, like I feel like I'm in a movie.
Yeah.
Like I'm getting exposed to all sorts of different stuff I never even knew existed before. So basically the second night when I had the second time taking MDMA, it was completely opposite to the first experience. Like the first experience, it was like my social anxiety was completely abolished. And I know people experience that from like drinking alcohol where they get wasted. And it's just, for me, that like alcohol never really did that. Drinking always just makes me feel shitty. So I don't know, can I cuss on?
You say whatever the fuck you want.
So, I love it. So it was like MDMA really like abolished my social anxiety. It was incredible. So I'm, the second night taking it, I'm expecting, all right, I'm going to have like a similar cool experience. We're going to just go party.
A rude awakening after that.
Yeah. No, seriously. Because like I felt it kick in, and in my body, I felt like so disconnected. Like I was almost like trapped in my mind. So it was almost like the social anxiety was like, it like super like rose to the surface. Like it was like completely overtaking me. So I pulled my buddy aside, the plastic surgeon, started going downstairs and went in the basement, started talking. And all of a sudden it hit me like a ton of bricks. I just blurted out, I feel like everyone's always judging me. And I started crying. Like it was like the most cathartic, I'd always kept my emotions pretty bottled up. And it was like just this catharsis of like actually experiencing those really negative emotions. But once I actually got through that, had a good cry, my social anxiety was like gone, in the sense like I could actually, for the first time seemingly that I'd ever been able to remember, I could look everyone just directly in the eye without feeling any sort of inner sense of shame or embarrassment. It was like this pure, connectivity between other people that night. And that showed me like the direction, or like what was possible. It showed me the destination, I should say.
Through the neuroscience lens, how do you think MDMA got you to have that thought and then speak it?
So MDMA produces a massive release of dopamine, so kind of increasing our drive, our motivation. But then it also results in this huge spike in serotonin, pro-social, enhancing our mood. And it's very rare that occurs, where usually dopamine and serotonin aren't working together like that.
Oh, interesting.
So
I always thought it was serotonin only.
Yeah, people talk about that, but it also has a big effects on dopamine. And then the other one is oxytocin, which is like that bonding neurotransmitter. So I think with all of that, it's like you feel like the euphoria, the ability to like bond and socially connect, but also the neuroplasticity that induces, where it's like changing your brain. I feel like in research, they refer to this as like a social plasticity window that MDMA induces, where basically all of the learned behaviors, everything you were doing in the past, you can basically rewire it and recondition it. Like they found this within mice, but then it also translates to people, where there's this period like after taking MDMA where people are just able to kind of dehabituate from those learned conditioned responses. And that was exactly what I experienced. So I think on a neuroscientific level, you could definitely explain it, in terms of like neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, the neuroplasticity. But then I think there's also like something about the felt experience where you're like literally feeling or experiencing life without the social anxiety, where it shows you, okay, what's possible. I think that's what psychedelics do in a lot of senses, is they like show you what's possible, that maybe you're not thinking nearly in that realm, but then you see it and it's like, you're not there. You're not at that destination, but it showed me kind of where to aim from there. So from there, it was kind of like continuing to utilize the neurotechnologies on myself and realizing that it was possible to experience life without social anxiety, which is ultimately what I ended up getting to.
So can you tell us how your technology works? Because I've been telling Brent about it a little bit, and it's so fascinating how you're rewiring the brain itself. And I'd love to hear it from you, like exactly how that mechanism is working in the brain.
Yes. So to first start off, we got to understand, so our brain both communicates on an electrical as well as chemical level. So people are a lot more familiar with the neurotransmitters, things like serotonin, dopamine, but there's also the brainwaves. So these are the electrical rhythms that our brain cells kind of use to communicate amongst each other. So the technology that I work with, the EEG, or what I do is a quantified EEG, is basically able to measure our brainwave activity. So once we have that measurement of our brainwave activity, we look at 19 different areas of the brain and are able to assess the 5 major brainwaves. So we can see if there's a brainwave that is too low in activity, too high, how different neural networks are connecting. And that's kind of the baseline assessment. So then we can understand, all right, if someone's dealing with depression or their productivity's down, whatever the issue is that they're wanting to really solve, we can kind of connect that to what on a biological level within their brain is driving that suboptimal cognitive performance. But then the technology, in order to actually rewire and retrain the brain, that kind of goes after the brain map. So neurofeedback, or what I do is called QEEG guided neurofeedback, meaning you use the QEEG, you use the brain map to then know exactly what brain waves need to be trained, what needs to be increased, what needs to be decreased, and specifically what areas of the brain to target. So rather than kind of just throwing a one-size-fits-all solution, it's more of like a detailed analysis of your brain activity and then matching that with your symptoms or what you're wanting to achieve, and then putting together a personalized neurotechnology protocol that's actually designed for your unique brain.
So this is far more powerful than like Lumosity or these like brain game apps that are just kind of for everybody. This is like your brain getting the help that it needs, very personalized.
Right. And it's a completely different, it is kind of like brain games that you're doing, like neurofeedback. It's basically involving auditory and visual feedback. Mm-hmm. So you're basically playing a video game with your mind. Sounds pretty bizarre.
It's fucking awesome.
It's fucking awesome. Yeah. So you're controlling one of the characters on the screen, and basically when your brain is getting into the desired state, which could be anything. We could be training you to increase your focus. We could be rewarding your brain when it gets more into a beta brainwave pattern. Beta is really associated with focus and concentration. Or maybe we're wanting to really get someone in a very deeply relaxed meditative state, and we're going to entrain or encourage more alpha and theta brainwaves. So regardless of what we're training, basically when someone's brain starts producing those healthier brainwave activity, then the screen becomes clear, the audio gets louder. So it's real-time feedback within 100 milliseconds, telling the brain exactly when it's doing well and reinforcing that behavior, and then also telling the brain when it's not doing well and taking that reward away. So it's operant conditioning, the principle in psychology where you reward, kind of like the Pavlovian conditioning, where you reward, certain behaviors and then you take that reward away. And because the feedback's occurring within 100 milliseconds, that's quicker than our conscious mind can even process information. So when people say like, okay, well, what do I need to be doing? What do I need to do to get the character to run faster, to get the audio louder on the screen? And a lot of it's just like your brain figures out what it needs to do. It's very much like a subconscious rewiring process that occurs.
Whoa.
Yep.
So is it taking effort while you're in a session, or are you just kind of letting your brain do what it needs to do?
A little bit of both. I mean, I tell people to have a soft focus on the screen. If they're doing like eyes open training, you could also be doing like eyes closed, more like meditation training. But it does take some conscious effort, but I think the brain's also, it's like a semi-active, somewhat active, somewhat passive process, where it's like you need to be alert, because it's like teaching your brain what it needs to do in order to function better. So there's like other modalities, neurotechnologies I work with, things like binaural beats or what's called audio-visual entrainment, and these just entrain the brain. So rather than neurofeedback being like it teaches the brain exactly what it needs to do to perform optimally, whereas these other neurotechnologies just directly entrain, they take your brain into...
What is entrain?
So basically, if you are pulsing whatever it is, light, sound, whatever sort of frequency, then the brain will entrain to whatever frequency that's being given. For instance, if you have, there's like this infrared helmet that I have. So it basically pulses infrared light. You guys have seen like the full like red light panels, right? Mm-hmm. So this infrared helmet is basically pulsing light at a specific frequency. So for instance, say the frequency is 10, like 10 cycles per second. The light's pulsing 10 times per second. Well, that correlates to an alpha rhythm, because alpha is between 8 to 12 cycles per second. Okay. So when that's entrained, the alpha waves or the 10 hertz is entrained, then the brain starts oscillating at that frequency. So it's basically picking up whatever the frequency that's being given, and it starts entraining, it starts creating those same brainwave patterns on its own.
Why would you do that with red light together?
The infrared. So, I mean, you're getting a lot of benefits just specifically from the infrared in terms of better blood flow and oxygenation to the brain, increased neurogenesis, decreased neuroinflammation. But specifically why you'd want to pulse like specific frequencies, I mean, that's based on the initial brain scan that we can show, all right, you struggle with your focus, all right, and we're seeing deficiencies of beta waves at the prefrontal cortex, an area of the brain really important for executive functioning and focus.
So you're just stacking two good things together, not necessarily like they're working, like 1 + 1 is equal, like a overall new thing.
With that technology, there's like the benefits independent of the frequency, and then there's also the frequency specific effects. Mm-hmm. Like they've measured specifically like 40 hertz, a gamma rhythm that can actually break up the neurofibrillary tangles that occur in Alzheimer's disease. Wow. So there's specific benefits that occur with that versus like a 10 hertz frequency has been shown to be really beneficial for traumatic brain injury. They've done a lot of studies. So you're getting a lot of different benefits with all these technologies depending on the frequency that's being trained. And that's personalized to each person, because if you take someone that already has ADHD, they already have a lot of excess production of like the slower brain waves like alpha and theta, and then you put them into an alpha theta state, that's just going to worsen their symptoms. They need to be sped up. Whereas you take someone that's more like OCD, anxiety, insomnia, I mean, that's the typical like high performer brain is like all high beta, being stuck in that, fight or flight, but also hyper driven, motivated. So with that kind of person, it's like they're going to benefit a lot more from relaxation training, kind of calming down some of those slower brain, or calming down some of the faster brain waves.
For context, can you give us a breakdown of each of the main brain waves so we know what all they do?
Yes, for sure. So starting from the slowest, there's delta. So delta is like deep, dreamless sleep when we're just completely unconscious. But delta is also associated when we see that in a waking state that's associated with neural inflammation. So that occurs from traumatic brain injuries, if there's some kind of toxicity issue within the brain, that's basically indicating a lack of blood flow and oxygenation. It's kind of like the brain is asleep. So all the different brain waves, we want to see a healthy balance based on kind of the situation at hand. If you're sleeping, that's completely normal if you're producing a lot of theta and delta. If that's occurring when you're trying to focus in an awake state, that's not good news. So that's delta. Then we have theta. Theta, you can think of that as like deep meditation, hypnosis, puts people into theta.
Like float tanks.
Get
you into theta. Okay, like right before sleep.
Exactly.
Is that like yoga nidra too? It's like...
Yeah, I think with I found like more alpha and theta. Okay. Yeah. And what's cool there too is like the alpha theta border. I don't know if you guys have heard anything about like Stephen Kotler's work.
No.
Yeah, he's a neuroscientist that studies kind of the neurochemistry and neuroelectricity of flow. So basically he's found like with flow states that occurs when someone sinks into kind of an alpha theta brainwave pattern. So that's like the conscious mind kind of temporarily deactivating something they call transient hypofrontality, which is basically the prefrontal cortex for a period of time. It kind of goes offline. It's like shutting down. And that's like the critical, the overthinking, a very critical self-critic, the inner critic. So that area of the brain kind of gets deactivated, which allows you to be more just completely immersed in the present moment. So like a lot of his research focuses on like extreme sports athletes, where it literally throws you into a flow state, because if you're thinking about what you're going to have for dinner while you're surfing a huge wave, I mean, that's the difference between life and death. Yeah. So it's like a forced flow state, but we can also obviously induce flow in other ways. But so that's kind of the theta, deep meditation, hypnosis, also kind of flow state. Alpha, also involved in flow states. Alpha is kind of more of an idling rhythm. So relaxed, calm. If you smoke some weed, drink a couple glasses of alcohol, that'll increase alpha waves in the brain. Alpha is just kind of a chill, calm, relaxed state. And then beta is where we spend the majority of like our waking consciousness. So going about our day, sending emails, talking to people, just cognitive processing takes place primarily in beta. So a lot of people run into issues getting stuck basically producing the higher end of the beta frequencies. So high beta, basically beta is like a wide frequency range from like 13 up to 30 hertz. So the lower beta is actually really beneficial. It's kind of a calm, focused, a tense state. But when you start getting up in the higher betas, basically anything over 20 hertz, like 20 to 30, that's very indicative. That's like a brainwave signature we see with anxiety, racing thoughts, people that have a lot of worry, insomnia, a lot of different pathological things kind of show up in high beta. So that's beta. And then lastly, we have gamma. So gamma is the fastest of the brainwaves. And what's really interesting about gamma, so gamma is sort of basically facilitates whole brain connectivity. So it's involved in like driving neuroplasticity, allowing different areas of the brain to communicate and connect in new ways. And what they found with like psychedelics, I've actually measured people on psychedelics like ketamine lozenges, microdoses of mushrooms, all sorts of stuff. And what you'll see is these huge spikes of gamma in the brain. So that's sort of allowing the brain to reorganize different neural networks to communicate in new ways. So that's also something meditation induces. And one of the really interesting studies, I think or a series of studies they did with Tibetan monks, they did these brain scans on monks and were trying to like see what is different about these monks' brains who'd been meditating 12 hours per day in the Himalayas, like what's different about their brain versus a normal person's brain. And one of the big findings was they had huge increases in their gamma waves. And that was kind of in a dose-dependent fashion, meaning the more they had meditated, the longer they'd been practicing, the stronger those gamma waves got. So researchers linked that to kind of this increased whole brain connectivity, expanded consciousness, and increased awareness. So gamma is also really involved in flow states because gamma rides on the back of the slower alpha and theta waves. So it's kind of like a slowing down to speed up thing.
Interesting. So it's like goes up to beta and then what? Gamma somehow loops back through, or?
So gamma like rides on the back of those slower frequencies. So think of like when you get into a flow state or when you're in a deep meditative state, your brain is kind of decelerating from beta down into alpha, into theta. And those gamma waves, those really, really fast gamma waves actually ride on the back of those slower alpha and theta waves. So it's kind of like a slowing down to speed up.
Is that kind of like if you think about music, you have BPMs similar to wavelengths, right? And so if you have a track, I'm thinking from DJ Brain. So if you have a track that's say 140 beats per minute, that's the speed it's moving at. You can play a song that's 70 beats per minute. You can't play anything else with that song because it'll clash. But if you play something that's half, then it will still match up with the faster BPM because it'll kind of go in tune. Is that kind of what's happening with the wavelengths, where it's sort of fitting within like a wavelength, but it's like half the size? So it's like if they're moving at frequency of 5 per second and then you have one at 10 per second,
right?
Are they kind of like fitting together in a way?
Yes, there is a lot of stuff related to that. That would be, going into like some deeper frequency stuff. But that definitely does occur.
Okay. So then I have a question unrelated to that, but related to the wavelengths. So from calm to or from slower to faster, you have theta, you have delta, theta, and then alpha, beta, gamma.
Yep, you got it.
Why are they not in order of like the Greek alphabet? This is alpha, beta.
I have no idea. That's a good question.
Oh, all right.
That's a good question. I don't even know what is the order of the Greek alphabet. I was never in a frat, so
me neither.
I'm not sure.
I just speak Greek, no big deal.
Okay.
No, I'm just kidding. I don't speak Greek.
So I'm curious, like how, so like you do a float tank, right?
Yeah.
So the possibility of going into gamma is also possible. Or is it the act of meditating is a different way of being stimulated than theta? Or because like when I go on a float tank, I have like several different experiences I have. A lot of times it's just like fidgety, my mind's all over the place. And then eventually I'll drop into this space sometimes where it's like, I'm like outside my body, or I can feel my body. And it's like my body's asleep, but I'm aware of everything. And then there's another phase that happens. I don't know if you've experienced this, where it's like I go into a vivid dream and my mind is just dreaming all these things, but I'm in control and I'm completely aware of nothing at all. Like I'm completely in a VR and I don't realize it until I come all the way back out. But I'm curious, like, is that have the potential to rewire your brain like these monks versus like sitting and meditating? Like, do you have to be active a little bit more to reach gamma? And maybe the float tank you're just staying in alpha theta. Does that make sense? When I'm kind of
I mean, there'll be like the traditional meditation people that are like anti-technology, but it's like how like anyone that I work with, it's like I ask them, hey, have you tried to meditate? It's like, yeah. Do you have a regular meditation practice? No. Like people just don't meditate because it's frustrating. It takes effort. And it takes a while to actually like see really significant results for a lot of people. So I think you take technologies like float tanks or like neurofeedback or like psychedelics. These are all modalities that kind of supercharge that process that meditation produces. But I think of it in the same way because I think like an advanced meditator would probably be able to, I'm definitely not at that level, but from what I've heard and read, like those kind of similar experiences to what you were describing in like the float tank, that's like an advanced meditator could just get there from sitting. Yeah, but the majority of people,
I couldn't imagine meditating, and like I've never had those kind of experiences in which I can have in a float tank.
Yeah,
and it takes not a lot of effort. You just have to keep your ass in there.
Yep.
And if you do it by the 6th, 7th, 5th session, you're gonna have a crazy experience. If you just stay in it and just breathe and don't like get out versus trying to meditate, there's a lot more effort that goes into that.
Yeah. I mean, it's just all sorts of technology. Technology can just speed up the process. So rather than instead of having to meditate on a cushion for 10 years in order to get there, you could go in a float tank. You could do ayahuasca. You could do these different things.
Put these things on your head.
Do the neurofeedback, audiovisual entrainment. Yep.
So what kind of results have you seen with your clients? I'm sure there's been some like huge improvements in some people.
Yeah, it varies so much because I would say the reason that someone is not functioning well, there can be, I always track it back to biological imbalances. If there's a guy that is in his mid 40s, low energy, isn't thinking well, and has low testosterone, I've seen people that get on testosterone replacement and that changes their life. Same deal with thyroid. I had a client who, and I've been able to like really identify, you can see patterns of like when people report the same symptoms, I'm thinking, okay, low testosterone, low thyroid. This woman that I worked with who got on thyroid replacement, it was like that completely fixed her depression. But then also when we come, like, I think the brain waves, that's another good biomarker. So just like assessing hormones, vitamins, minerals, the brain waves are kind of like these brain biomarkers that we can assess. And then when we figure out kind of what's wrong with that per se, if we connect someone's anxiety to overactivity within a certain part of their brain, well, then we calm that part of the brain and their anxiety really goes away. So that's something that usually within like the first several sessions, it's like people report feeling a lot calmer, their mood's better, they're sleeping deeper. But the magic of neurofeedback, I think, is really like when you get to around like the 40 to 60 session mark, the research has kind of stated that with that amount of sessions, people get long lasting benefits.
What's the optimal amount of time to get to 40, 50 sessions?
I like having people do like 3 or 4 sessions a week over a 3-month period of time. So then you're going to get to that 40 to 60 session mark, because that's what they've shown with studies, like follow-up studies, even a year later, like after someone's done no additional neurofeedback training, 1 year out, there's still reduced anxiety scores, depression scores. So, and that's what I've seen with clients is that it's not something that people have to necessarily continue with forever. The benefits will continue accumulating. We can target different aspects of cognition, but once people have done a round of neurofeedback, I've seen people get rid of their social anxiety, get rid of their depression, their chronic sleep issues for multiple years, all sorts of different things. But what the point I was trying to make with like the hormones is that I kind of take a holistic approach to, the brain waves and what's going on in the brain. That's kind of an indicator of, all right, there's dysregulated brainwave activity. So what's the cause? Like, was there a traumatic brain injury? Is someone exposed to environmental toxins like mold? Do they have vitamin or mineral deficiencies? So the brain scan kind of gives us these clues as far as like what might be the problem. But once we can then actually address whatever the main issue is that's kind of holding someone back from having ideal mental health or cognitive performance, that's really where the magic is.
Wow. Fascinating. Well, do you want to hook us up with some brain stuff?
Brent,
you have another question in here.
Well,
Yeah,
I got
go
a
for
shit
it.
ton actually, and they're all
Go for
super random.
All right, rapid
I
fire
like it.
questions.
Do you know if different genres of music, what their brainwaves, like what do they activate brainwave wise? Like, I don't know if you, like, maybe it's not even a thing, but like hip hop, or maybe it's just based on BPM, right? If it activates different brainwaves. Because I feel like with me, my brain, I think, is more in like theta all the time or whatnot. And when I play music on a very high BPM with like a lot of melodies, all of a sudden it's like I can focus and think. It's like it does something to my brain to the point where all of a sudden I can be present and do things. And then like without of it, I can't focus.
Yeah, he'll listen to like intense, heavy trance music.
And all of a sudden I feel relaxed and focused.
And no lyrics, right?
No.
Okay.
Melodies, long melodies.
Yeah. That does sound like a brainwave entrainment. There's different things. There's different audio tracks out there that you can listen to. And similar idea with the technology I utilize called binaural beats. It basically is feeding specific frequencies into the left ear versus right ear, and that can entrain the brain to create different brainwave patterns. So yeah, you can think about the ways to entrain the brain. You can do it through light, visually. You can do it through sound, through the auditory system. There's all these different ways, but for sure, music is definitely music definitely like activates our emotional state, changes our emotional state, which then also, influences the brainwave patterns. So,
All right, one more question before we do the hookup. We're about to go to a festival. And hypothetically, when individuals take things like ecstasy, what are tips to, as you said, when you reach those gamma, you have the opportunity to reorganize your mind,
yeah.
right? Do you have tips for people when they take ecstasy?
When they allegedly take ecstasy.
Allegedly.
Yeah, not that would be happening.
No.
At all.
Or
Just
acid or
completely-
mushrooms, but when you reach these...
Or whippets or whatever you can find, or ketamine or whatever.
Whippets might be Delta.
Pretty much.
Yeah, just like things to think about, people who are engaging in, psychedelics in a responsible way with intentions.
Ceremonial substances.
Yeah, how does one go about thinking about reorganizing? Because you have this opportunity. It's like you open this portal.
Yeah.
And it's like you could just let it open and then it closes. Or do you have tools because you've been through these experiences and now being, you're a neuroscientist, like here's like 3 things you should think about if you want to, play in this brainwave that allows change.
So I think that, and this is from personal experience along with just talking to a lot of people, that oftentimes if you like the next day, like after taking a psychedelic, after taking MDMA, I used to do this, where I'd go like on a long bike ride. And I feel like what psychedelics do is they kind of plant and kind of all these different seeds in our brain. But if we're just partying and, we mix it with alcohol and like other things, it can kind of kill those seeds. I think that's kind of the way I think about it.
Yeah, makes sense.
But if we can allow those seeds to kind of germinate and there's a proper like integration process afterwards, I used to always love like going on a long bike ride, and I would feel like that I actually had more insights, or like I'd put together the insights that I had started to have, and I would sort of start to like reorganize it the next day.
Awesome.
So I think like everyone talks about like with psychedelics now, like preparation and integration. And really, when we think about like what's going on of neuroplasticity, it's not necessarily just a good thing. Like you could experience a horrible trauma and neuroplasticity is working, and now you're in a constant state of anxiety. So what psychedelics do is they just dramatically open up that neuroplastic window, allowing our brains to rewire in different ways. But we sort of there needs to be some like directed neuroplasticity. So I think that's where like you could, listen to something like empowering. You could put on some like Tony Robbins, I think is like where it's like, psychedelics are kind of giving your brain this like opportunity to lay down kind of all of these new pathways. Like I think about it like the analogy of like on the mountain, right, where there's this fresh blanket of snow, and then that allows us to carve all these new different pathways down the mountain. And that's, I think, what psychedelics do. They provide that fresh blanket of snow, but it's up to us to forge whatever those pathways down the mountain are.
All right, last thing I'll say is that's why people with Alzheimer's should be given psychedelics and studied. Because if where the brain isn't working, it's like brain damage. And they haven't really figured out if you can open new pathways and rewire it, right? Like circuits, like maybe that part doesn't run that part of the brain, but the brain can adapt and start running that new piece by trying to redirect. I think you could help people a lot.
They've already started doing research with like microdose psilocybin and very positive results with Alzheimer's.
Do you know a little bit about that? Can you just talk about some of the results or no?
Yeah, I mean, from what I've seen, it's so adult neurogenesis, like the birth and creation of new brain cells, can actually occur throughout the entire adult lifespan. So they used to think that this was something that only occurred, throughout adolescence, and that as our brain kind of solidified, that our brain cells just started dying off. And with something like Alzheimer's disease, there is this rapid die-off of neurons. But then if you can kind of give the brain these growth factors, you can stimulate neurogenesis. Think about like with psychedelics, you could do that, microdosing, also exercise, different, supplements can do that. Lion's mane, curcumin, fish oil, all of these things can increase neurogenesis. So kind of allowing the brain to grow these new brain cells, new connections. So even though there's ones that are dying off, if the rate of the new connections is kind of higher than the rate of the brain cells dying off, then you can actually make an impact with something like Alzheimer's.
Awesome.
Let's hook it up.
Do the brain scan.
So for the listeners that are listening and not watching, Toby has brought his bag of goods over here, his Mary Poppins bag.
The mad scientist himself.
Of treats. And so he has a quantified EEG machine that he's going to hook up to our brains and then tell us just what parts of our brains are not working, which is probably going to be a lot. We're gonna find out.
They definitely did not design these for fashion or for aesthetic purposes. Not yet.
Soon.
They do have these like really cool like $25,000 like dry caps that look like these like alien helmets. I really want to get one. They're not even any better in functionality, but they just look
nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
So,
not as nerdy as these ones.
Exactly. Have you guys ever seen one of these?
Not in person, but
like medical mysteries or some kind of
fascinating. I used to like, I really wanted to study the brain. I almost went to school in Amsterdam to study neurobiology.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I ended up just not going to college instead, starting a business instead of getting education there. But so I'm familiar with EEGs, fascinated by them, never actually used them.
Right.
So excited for this.
Super cool. What do you think like appealed to you the most about neurobio?
I think just the fact, like the cognitive sciences are like, it's fascinating. Like, I think it's because I don't understand the brain. That's what gets me. Is like, I have no idea how it works. And like, they say that we understand the brain less than we understand outer space. Like, we know more about space than we know our own brain.
Right.
Which is fucking crazy. Like, it's inside of us. And the brain trying to study itself is what's going on. Like, if you study the brain, it's just the brain trying to figure the brain out. Like, that's fucking weird. Like, there's too much trippy stuff happening with the brain. And it's the seat of all of it, right? Like, without the brain, we're just a flesh suit. So I wanted to understand the mystery behind it.
Yep. I think that's what really appealed to me about it, is the fact that it's just like, we're never gonna like fully get there, right? Because there's new discoveries that are being made every single day.
Totally.
With neuroscience. So I feel like, I don't know, like studying like doctors that like are like nephrologists that study kidneys, right? Like, we probably know everything there is to know about kidneys.
You're eventually going to run out of kidney stuff.
Right. Yeah. Right. But with the brain, it's like there's no limit to like what we're going to uncover.
Totally.
Yep. So,
and because it goes so much deeper than just the physical. Like you said, there's the chemical, there's the electrical, but then there's the shit that we just don't get, like consciousness.
Right.
How the fuck are we going to figure that one out?
Yeah.
Death. Life, all of that is all encompassed in the brain. And then what really blew my mind was learning that like the neocortex, you have this sheet on the outside of your brain, the neocortex, and then inside the brain, most of it is just this gray matter. It's just like connective tissue, right? Correct me if I'm wrong on anything, but then you have the neocortex. And if you have all these like ridges and bumps in your brain, right? And so that's going over all of the ridges. And if you took it off of the brain and you just pulled it out, it would be about the size of a dinner napkin and like the same like width, right? So you just have this sheet, but that's where everything happens. Like every decision, every thought, every memory, everything, every piece of you is encompassed in this little napkin.
All right, I'm gonna start wiping your hands here. Yeah, it's pretty wild. And the fact that like the brain is the consistency of like soft butter.
Yeah.
You think about like,
really?
So it's like, think about inside of a hard, bony skull where it's like playing contact sports or like doing stuff. It's incredible to me like to see these guys like working with like the boxers or UFC fighters where it's like they've taken so many blows to the head, but they're still able to perform at a pretty high level because the brain is like just so resilient and can really bounce back. But I think eventually that ends up taking a toll with like CTE.
Yeah, totally.
And all that.
And the brain is like, it's the only organ that's fully protected. You have other organs in here, but you can get to them, you know?
Yep.
The brain is, nature knew. It was like, that one's got to be safe. Even the thing that makes life, our balls, it's just outside.
Yeah, they're way out there.
They're just way out there for a tiger to eat, but your brain, fully safe.
There's like, you got two. It's good.
Yeah. What are the odds of a tiger getting both of those?
Yeah.
You don't mind if I inject into your head?
Go ahead. shoot me up, dude. I inject.
Have to go through the eardrum, right?
Yeah, that's what I figured you got.
No. Blunt tip needle, meaning it's not going to actually poke you. It's just to get the gel.
It's fine. I inject my stuff all the time. We take peptides in this house.
What peptides you on?
I was doing BPC 157, CJC 1295, and ipamorelin.
Oh yeah, I did the CJC. Is it ipamorelin?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I've been doing that.
Yeah.
Call it ipamorelin.
What? I don't know. Whatever. Pronunciation doesn't matter.
What do you think about?
Yeah. What's your take on it?
I mean, I think that we have no idea. Like these things haven't been, people haven't
yeah.
been using them for 10, 20 years. So it's like we really have no clue.
Yeah.
On paper, they look really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I refuse to get the COVID shot, but I will inject these mystery compounds into my body for months on end, no problem.
I think over the next probably 10 years, they're going to develop much more where they're much more effective. I think right now it's like, they don't really know. They're kind of like, I'm assuming guessing on dosing schedule.
Yeah. Everybody's saying different amounts of dosing.
Exactly.
How long you should cycle it.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's just a big guess. And I think for some people, they respond really well. And I think like maybe I noticed it, maybe I didn't. I don't know. It's like,
Yep.
I think it's going to change a lot.
Have you guys tried any of the like nootropic peptides? There's things like C-Max or C-Link, cerebrolysine.
One of my clients did.
Cerebrolysine.
Let's talk about those later.
Yeah. That's like the gold standard.
Yeah, one of my clients, he did a bunch of different peptides, and he said the peptides that helped him the most were the ones for the brain. He would sleep super deep, and his mind was super clear.
Hell yeah.
More than any fat loss or muscle gain one. Those really affected him, he said.
Yep.
Interesting.
There's one like cerebrolysine where it contains all of these like nerve growth factors where it's like
let's just take
dramatically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
CJC was lame.
Yeah.
Give me that stuff.
Yeah. Where do we get
Do you think Waste to Well has it?
Cerebrolysine.
Let's talk about those.
It's in these vials.
Nice.
It's in these glass vials. Like I think it's from Austria.
Yeah.
And you literally have to like break the glass
the old
open.
school vials.
You know what I'm talking?
Yeah.
So it's a cool experience of just like opening it.
Have you tried it?
Yeah.
What were your thoughts?
You feel like a superhuman. Like,
Dude, let's go.
Like,
Sign me up.
Yeah.
Where do you get it?
Online. There's
Okay,
there's
well,
different websites.
You give us the
I'll give
websites
you,
that
like-
are legit.
Yeah,
Because we're going to get some fake Chinese
No,
knockoffs.
they all come in the same, like there's only like one company or like one brand that does it. So like it always, I don't think that anyone does like a knockoff packaging, but it's like always looks the same.
Okay.
So, yep.
That's what I want, dude.
Yep.
Yeah, if we have smarter brains, then you can get leaner and build more muscle. We're doing it the wrong way.
Yeah. So we're focusing on the body first.
Yeah.
That's wrong.
We need to get our brain smarter.
I need brain not dumb no more.
Brain dum-dum.
Cerebrolysine.
That is the one. Yeah. I have some clients who take dihexa. That's another one you can look into.
Mm.
Yeah. Stimulates like BDNF, brain derived neurotrophic factor.
Nice.
So, yep.
Cool.
There's a lot of stuff there. Yeah, but my experience just taking like CJC and ipamorelin, I felt like I was getting so much better deep sleep. Like looking at the Oura Ring, I was getting like 2.5, 3 hours of deep sleep.
Damn.
And I just like, I think that led me to like feel like way clearer cognitively just because I was sleeping like a baby.
Yeah, sleep's everything. For your brain,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
sleep's everything.
Yep. I mean, they've shown just like people that go like a few days of like having sleep deprivation, it like shows up similarly to like how someone with Alzheimer's would look. Like,
Oh, I totally believe it. When I was like in Seattle and I'd be cracked out, going to bed super late, waking up super early and having to drink a bunch of caffeine. And I know I wouldn't like actually be asleep, but I passed out for like 5-6 hours and did that for like a year straight. There would be times where like my memory would go right in front of me with a client. Like it would I would blank.
Mhm.
Or like it would be like I'm almost brain dead feeling at certain points. It'd be wild experiences. Like I'm losing my memory, like because I'm not sleeping.
yeah.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yeah. I mean, there's been studies too where it's like that's like driving with like sleep deprivation can be more dangerous than like driving like at a 0.08 blood alcohol
100%.
level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've definitely gotten into way more tricky situations driving tired than allegedly driving drunk, which is never a thing I would do, mind you.
No, heavens forbid.
Heavens forbid. Look at all that activity.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's all noise right there just because we haven't actually.
Okay, I'm going to calm it all
Connected the
down. I have
electrode.
full mind body connection. I'm gonna
Make the computer.
but we have it connected to the electron, so it's not real.
You guys are going to see all those guys start to turn green or white. That means we have an optimal connection. So that's just showing what's called the electrical impedance, basically how good of a signal we have. So all the ones that are still red there, that just means I need to put some more gel and make sure that those guys have an optimal connection. And then we'll start seeing a bunch of the horizontal squiggly lines on the screen there. Basically what we're seeing here.
Can you see, Brent?
Yep.
All right. Okay, and we're in.
Yes. So, yeah, that's better. Okay. So what we're looking at here, basically each of the different lines is showing the brainwave activity at a different location. So FP1, FP2, that's the prefrontal cortex right behind the forehead. F3, F4, frontal lobe. So it's kind of going towards the back of the brain. And then it goes T3, T4. Those are the temporals kind of wrapping around the sides of the head. So what we're seeing, each of the lines is kind of a composition of those 5 major brainwaves, but it doesn't really look like much right now, which is the whole purpose of the brain maps, which basically take this data and then give us a way to visually represent it in a way that makes more sense with the heat maps. So it kind of translates, runs this through an algorithm, and then puts it into the heat map so we can see areas of low activity represented in lighter colors, areas of high activity with warmer colors. So something interesting I'll show you here. Try, let me move this so we can see this. Try clenching your jaw. That's all muscle tension there.
Wow.
Then you can relax your jaw. Try blinking your eyes a few times. So all those big vertical projections, those are all blinks. And then try closing your eyes for like 5 seconds.
That one was me opening my eyes as wide as I could. All right, now close.
Close your eyes for like 5 seconds.
Clench your butthole. Just makes a giant circle.
Okay, so if you open your eyes, so you see how there's a bunch of these like higher amplitude waves, like compare this to like eyes.
Mm-hmm.
So like,
yeah,
that's eyes open, eyes
that's eyes closed.
Yep.
Yeah.
So basically what we're seeing there is alpha, those higher amplitude, kind of slower brain waves that occur with meditation or even when we close our eyes for a few seconds. Right now we're seeing like predominantly beta, which is exactly what, most of us are producing just throughout our day-to-day. But, all right, so we'll do 2 5-minute recordings. First, we'll do 5 minutes with your eyes open and then 5 minutes eyes closed. So you can kind of just find a point. I'll kind of move this out of your way so you're not looking at this.
Okay, I'll look over here.
Yep. So most important thing during the recording, just try to keep as still as you can, then relax any tension maybe holding on to. All right. You can call that good there.
Nice.
All right. So basically the purpose of that is just so we get enough good data for me to put like a minute in the final report. Anything that's not what we call artifact, which is like muscle movement, electrode pops, or
same thing they call AI things, right? Artifacts.
Is that right?
Yeah, like in an AI video or like an AI generated image, when when a hand looks like this, right? It looks wonky. They call it an artifact. Like when something is discombobulated, I guess.
Yeah.
From what it should be.
Right.
There's a glitch essentially.
Right.
It's called artifacts.
That makes sense. It's keep like bumping into that. It's like makes it
just keep smashing on
it. It's kind of a cool, like it looks like from this angle, like it's just this like extension of your head.
Nice.
Yeah, like a.
He's just having a good idea. It's an idea light bulb.
It's getting stimulated.
These are cool. This guy's cool too.
Yeah, they did a good job in here.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so.
All right, now we're back.
Show you guys.
I got a brain scan. Toby's going to walk through the data that we see here, and then I want to do a full brain scan where we can do like a full 5-minute eyes open, eyes closed, full thing. But we did a preliminary scan. We're going to see what parts of my brain are overactive, underactive.
Yes.
How many of these scans do you do on a regular basis?
Not as many in person anymore, but when I was working with clients exclusively in person, probably, I don't know, 10 per week.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Probably done a few thousand of these by now.
So now when you do scans, it's usually virtual, or you explain how your process works. You mail somebody a EEG machine, and then they wear it, and then you kind of do Zoom sessions with them to get the same result.
Yeah, there's some mobile equipment now that's like clinical grade equipment that people can instead just kind of place on themselves. It's not the full 19 channel cap that we just did. Like this is definitely the gold standard, but for people who are in Nebraska or Wyoming, where there's like not even any
fucking Nebraskans,
we need to be able to scan them too. So yeah, the virtual process just works like, or you're basically I teach people where they're like placing the electrodes on themselves. They're acquiring the scan through the app that I utilize, and then everything just gets transmitted to my dashboard.
Cool.
So I'm able to review it.
Is this an app you created?
Not an app that I created. I'm like a licensed clinician through the app. Yeah. I want to create my own app though. Like that's the big vision one day, is like have my own app and my own equipment where I design the stuff and like combine a bunch of different technologies into one, like a super device.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Like Oura Ring for your brain.
The Neuroflex.
Yes.
Yeah, if there was more cool shit for your brain that looked more like Oura Rings or Whoops. Have you watched that 3 Body Problem show?
No.
Okay, so it's this crazy sci-fi thing, but basically there's like this crazy looking dope silver helmet they put on, and it puts you into this VR world. Someone needs to make the next brain looking or Apple thing to look like that, because it looks sick as fuck.
Interesting.
Watch that show. But there's the headpiece they put on is such a cool design. Like someone needs to copy that.
Have you ever heard of the Neurovisor?
No.
Oh, it's a cool device. It looks pretty sleek, and it's like their idea is like it uses like all these flashes of lights to try to like mimic like an ayahuasca experience. Right? I think they have different settings to try to like mimic the effects of different psychedelics.
Wow.
I did it. I tried it at a conference. Definitely put me into a somewhat of an altered state.
Okay.
It was interesting.
Cool. I remember when iDosers came out, it was like binaural beats that were made to simulate drugs. So they had like a cannabis one and an acid one.
You try those?
I did, and I didn't.
What did acid sound like?
I don't remember what it sounded like. It was just
more like a frequency.
It's a frequency
embedded, right?
Yeah, but it's funny. They had a mescaline one, and I listened to the mescaline one, and it had like kind of tribal drumming and someone chanting in the background. I'm like, I'm pretty sure that's not. I think you're just trying to make it sound like it's mescaline.
Sounds kind of racist.
Yeah,
those guys must have gone out of business, huh?
It for sure went out of business. They probably made a butt ton of money and then dipped out. But I remember I went to my friend's house one time, and he was pretty straight edge. And so it was his birthday. And so we had a bunch of people over, and we're like, let's do iDoser drugs. Now, I was probably the only person there that had done real drugs. And so everybody's like, oh, I think I feel high. I feel. We just laid like in his room all listening to put our headphones in and listen to like the weed one. And I was like, you guys aren't high. But you will be after you drink the punch that I spiked. All right, so what are you doing now? Explain this process here. You're marking something's red, something's green.
Yep. So I'm basically just looking in this recording for 1 minute of really good data. So you see how there's a lot of wonky data here where things are going all over the place. But then things have settled down kind of at the latter part of the recording. So got a bunch of good data. Basically, we just want to see a bunch of horizontal lines. These guys, those are blinks. So I'm not selecting that because that's not your actual brain activity. So yeah, I did this for like 3 years, literally just like 6-7 hours a day, just looking at EEGs at the research lab, just going through processing, knowing what is good data versus what's bad data. So now I'm going to generate the actual report here.
It's a big report that just says, too dumb.
What do you do for your own brain health?
Man, a lot of things. I like fasting a lot.
Yeah?
I feel it was very clear when I fast.
Okay.
Yep.
What's your fasting protocol?
Sometimes I'll usually do like intermittent fasting, but like 16/8, but sometimes like 1 day a week I'll try to do
full day.
Good idea. I'll do like a 24-hour. I'll try to do like a few times per year. I'll do like a 3-day. I've tried to go longer than 3 day, and I feel like my body's just like it doesn't.
That's the limit.
That's the limit for me, at least.
What do you notice a 1 day versus like an intermittent fast?
I feel like it's just like you get into a like deeper ketosis where it's like your brain is burning more of the like ketone bodies, which are like generated from like fat, like you're kind of burning your own fat for fuel versus burning glucose when you're eating. So it's like a more fuel efficient source of energy for the brain.
You're just forcing it to push over into the energy system.
I would think of it as like you're providing like an alternative fuel source. You're like a hybrid car. So you can burn gas, you can burn run off either fuel source.
Do you have tips of how you like to do it? Do you try to stay super busy, or do you try to stay chill, or
busy? Like, what do you mean in terms of
like if you're going to do a fast for a day?
Oh, like
do you
what to
just
actually
like
do?
Chill at home and watch Netflix, or do you actually like I'm going to do a bunch of work on the day?
I mean, I feel super clear like fasting, especially like the third day of like a 3-day fast. I feel so crystal clear, like I'm on Adderall or something. Like I'm just like so laser focused and sharp. And my sleep, on like looking at my aura data, I'll need less sleep. I'll get like 5.5, 6 hours of sleep. It'll be like 2.5 hours of deep sleep, and I'll feel incredible.
Wow, cool.
Waking up. So,
what other things do you do for brain health?
Oh man, there's a lot.
Like
I put on the infrared helmet. I do that a lot.
So talk about, that's what I'm curious. Do you know a lot about infrared? Because there's always people arguing with like the sauna world that infrared doesn't have enough research behind it. But I'm like, I don't know. I feel like I really notice the benefits, and I think it's going to be such an important thing in the future, even more so. Like, what are your thoughts about infrared, like infrared in a sauna, infrared waves?
Yeah.
Because I try to, like, when I go to yoga, I find this infrared, and maybe it's not enough infrared or strong enough, but yoga studios that have infrared, right? Because it's way different than just a hot yoga class or whatever. I feel way different.
Right. Because it's penetrating a lot deeper, like versus red light is good for like surface, like skin level issues. But the infrared, that's used like more for brain devices, because that actually penetrates to some degree. It's not getting like into the super, super deep areas of the brain, but it is able to penetrate kind of through the skull into the cortex, like the outermost layer of the brain. So there's a lot of research looking at traumatic brain injury, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, anxiety, depression. There's all sorts of different things. I should have brought the intranasal light. It looks pretty wild, but there's like the intranasal, like two things that go in each nostril, and then they're sending the infrared light, basically penetrates and gets into like the prefrontal cortex. So that's one of the things I noticed, like the biggest impact with that, where I just feel super sharp and clear headed.
And also, do you believe that it can penetrate into cells and help them turn over, like let out toxins or increase their ability to use energy? Because I notice when I do infrared yoga a couple times a week, my energy goes way up. Versus if I just sauna, I feel relaxed and I feel healthier. But when I infrared, it's like I feel fucking solar energized.
Well, it's literally what's happening is it's getting absorbed by the mitochondria, the parts of our cells, high school biology.
The powerhouse
of the cell.
ATP, adenosine triphosphate.
So it's driving up way more ATP, which is literally more energy production. So all of the cells in your body are literally, they have more energy. So when it comes to the brain, it translates to increased cognitive performance, improved, with neurodegeneration, but then also like physically, your muscles, organs, like everything has more energy. It's going to work better.
Yeah, I fucking love yoga combined with infrared. It's fucking magic.
Yeah. I need to do yoga more.
Because you do.
I always feel so good after a yoga class.
And then especially if you had the infrared.
Yeah. Is that so like hot? You're talking about like hot yoga?
No, so it's not hot, because hot is just a hot room. But
I can't do that.
Yeah,
I'll be like, I need to bring more towels, but I'll just be slipping all over.
Infrared.
That's called hatha yoga, where it's just a hot room. Okay. But some yoga studios, like here, if you do one, Black Swan, they do infrared, and there's some other that.
Are they infrared? I thought there's just a hot room.
I'm pretty sure it's infrared.
You'll know it's infrared because there's panels.
Yeah, they have panels.
Do they?
Yeah.
Which one?
I'm pretty sure it's infrared. Anyways, whatever.
I don't think so.
Find an infrared one, and it's definitely a lot different.
Because usually there has to be like there's very specific panels. Unless they added them, could be they added them. Yeah. And then you feel amazing. And if you start to sweat, you just wipe your sweat. You don't feel hot anymore. Versus like, Bikram yoga, that's fucking brutal. And that's usually just, they have heaters in the room and they're just fucking cooking you alive.
What's the difference between Bikram and hatha?
So Bikram is a guy who took some of the traditional yoga poses that is like Hatha is one of the traditional styles of yoga. And he took a lot of Hatha poses. So it's basically he took a series of Hatha yoga poses and then he named it after himself and licensed it and sold the shit out of it. But he added,
and he was a cult leader.
He added the heat. He added the like, you have to keep talking as an instructor the whole time. Like he put all this stuff into place. But the poses is Hatha. But the hot heat and all that, he added all that in.
I see.
It's another thing I take from my brain here.
Ketones?
Ketone esters. So these guys
You
like
like
basically
those?
mimic, like deeper states of fasting. Dude, I feel so clear-headed. I do like a couple capsules.
I see.
Yeah,
You
you
do
can
it on
take
your
a couple
fasting day
capsules.
too?
Yeah, because it just puts you into that deeper state of
So it'll
ketosis.
trigger you to go deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Exactly.
You said we could try it?
Yeah.
How
go
many
for it.
capfuls?
Do like 2.
What do you think
You'll
of
notice it.
that other company called
Shaking or anything?
Yeah. Yeah. You might have to like just kind of puncture that. Kind of annoying to get that off. Go over it. Because we already kind of talked about the different brainwaves. So yeah, it tastes nasty.
It tastes fucking terrible.
Yeah.
Oh.
Ketone esters are known for their
Oh, it's disgusting, dude. Oh my God.
It's like I don't even know what to compare it like like you're drinking like battery acid or something.
Oh, it's like creamy acid. Oh my God. It's bitter.
It's worth it. I couldn't tell you guys
That's
how
worse than the fucking smelling salts.
Yeah, we've done smelling salts on this podcast before.
What is that? Smelling?
It's what powerlifters use. It's basically ammonia, and so you sniff the smelling
Basically,
salts and
that in your nose.
that in your, but way stronger.
Yeah.
And it's like you're basically smelling pure ammonia, and then it activates an adrenaline response.
Makes
so
you
you
wanna
can
cry.
you can hit a PR or like you can lift way heavier because your adrenaline spikes.
That's pretty
They
interesting.
probably do it a lot in slap boxing too.
Mm-hmm.
Take big whiffs.
I don't know why it's like weird at this point. I've done this so much, like I actually almost enjoy the flavor.
Well, because you get the benefit, so you just associate
yeah.
it. Like alcohol.
Well, 'cause
can
you're
get
like-
the effect.
You know that they found that with like caffeine, like with coffee, like people think that they like the taste of coffee, but think about most people when they first try coffee, it's like as a kid, it's like disgusting.
Yeah.
But it's like because we like the effects of the substance, it tricks our brain into thinking that we actually like the taste of coffee.
Well, I'll counter
like
that
the
because
effect.
I don't
I've
drink
seen that.
caffeine really ever,
Yeah.
and I don't like coffee. Coffee actually makes me feel like shit. But I
How
love.
so?
I get too antsy. I feel
Okay.
anxious. My palms get sweaty. I can drink other types of caffeine like green tea and stuff, and I
Yeah.
feel fine. But like coffee caffeine, I just don't enjoy. And then I feel energized for like 10 minutes, and then I crash, and I really don't like it. But I love the taste of coffee.
Interesting.
I love
So you-
coffee flavored things. I'll drink I want to drink more coffee, but
Huh.
it just makes me feel bad, and I don't enjoy it. And
Huh.
then
Just get
I also
decafs.
I don't need it.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm curious to hear more about, before we kind of go over this, like how would you kind of assess your current cognitive performance? Is there any aspects of like your mood, your memory, focus? How's
In
everything
general?
doing in general?
In general, I feel fairly energized throughout the day. I feel like my sleep score, according to Orta, is not very good. I do wake up a lot at night, but I don't
Mhm.
feel tired throughout the day. Like I can get my work. I work a lot
Mm-hmm.
and I work hard, but I don't feel exhausted. Like I can work out and then go to the gym, or I can work and then work out at the gym, and like I'm fine. So I feel energized most of the time. In terms of, I can get very analytical, and so there's maybe a tinge of social anxiety. I used to have a lot more when I was younger, but it's kind of gone away now. So, or at least I've worked to overcome it. So, but there may still be some tinges every now and again with that. Yeah, I guess what other things should I be aware of that I can answer? I've never really analyzed my mental state.
Yeah, I mean, I usually touch on like focus, memory. How about your stress? Like, do you feel like
Oh,
your anxiety levels are managed?
Right
or-
now, they're pretty high. I just got full blood panel tests and my cortisol was off the fucking
Really?
charts. So yeah,
So what is the range and what was it?
I have no idea. It was just red.
That would have been
It
interesting.
said all red.
They're like to the max end of the red.
Everything, like my blood was pretty much perfect. It was like, yeah, you're really good. You're just stressed the fuck out. So cortisol was high. And
My cortisol's
memory,
good.
whatever.
Which I'm surprised.
Yeah, everything else was bad for your
No, it's always my liver enzymes are always slightly high. Always. It's been that way for the last 6 years. I've even had like my liver scanned with an ultrasound, and they're
Wow.
like, they don't know. They do say, though, there are some studies that show like when you lift or work out very intensely, in general, they can be sometimes unnaturally raised and it's a false signal of like liver problems, they can be slightly raised.
So like your liver, like it's like working harder, but it's almost like maybe strengthening it because it's like, I don't know.
It's just like it's elevated, but not of concern kind of
Okay.
deal.
Okay. All right. So, the other thing I was going to ask you about, any past head injuries, ever any concussions, blows to the head?
I was dropped on, it's not a joke. I was dropped on my head as a child. And I think I got a concussion and I was probably 4 years old, but that was the last like big head injury.
Okay.
Did go to a lot of raves and did a lot of head banging. So I'm sure some of that has probably been a factor.
Right.
Well, it looks like you've been actually in 5 car accidents based on your brain data.
Yeah, according to this, you have CTE.
Sorry, bud. Overall, no, you have a very healthy looking brain. So
say it louder for the people in the back.
Tony's got a very healthy looking brain.
Hell yeah.
All right.
So going on my dating app profiles.
I was thinking about, what's crazy is like this dude, you guys heard of Dr. Amen before? He's like a celebrity brain scanner, Daniel Amen. Never seen that guy?
I recognize the name, but I can't picture him in my mind.
He's like the big dude.
Oh, is he the old bald dude?
Yeah, he's like an OG in the brain scan space.
Yeah.
But he like talk. I don't think he's even joking. Where he's like he does brain scans on all of his daughter's boyfriends to like see whether they're fucking.
That's
like,
awesome.
I would.
Yeah, might as well.
Yeah. But think about like the applications of like, what if there's like a dating app where everyone had their brain scan like revealed, and then it's like you could see.
I want to know your Oura Ring score. I want to know your sleep score, your brain score.
Upload all that.
Yeah, your blood work.
If you've done 23andMe, let me see your genome.
Yeah,
whole sequence, all that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what we're looking at here, so this is age and gender matched in terms of the database. So compared to other guys who are 30.9, 30.9, but. So basically the white is indicating healthy kind of normal levels of activity.
Okay.
The lighter colors are going to be showing underactivity. So with this intensity, so the light blue just being 1 standard deviation below the norm, moving towards more solid blue, that being more severe. We don't see much underactivity. We're more seeing the overactivity, which is shown like with the warmer colors.
Mm-hmm.
So yellow, mild, orange, moderate, and red being more severe. So if we kind of take a bird's eye view of what's going on here, there is a lot of white healthy activity, but we can see specifically an area of your brain that is kind of problematic throughout the frequencies. This area T4, so that's the right temporal lobe that sits right above the right ear there.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't ask you about your memory. You ever issues at all with short-term memory, or you feel like pretty good with that?
Who? How did I get here? Short-term memory is pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah, long-term memory, I don't know, it's hard to articulate. I think my memory is good, but I think what it is I don't put enough emphasis on things, so it's easy to forget them. But if it's important to me, I will remember.
Got it. So if we kind of look at this diagram, this chart here, so it kind of explains the different functions of these major lobes of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So talking specifically about the temporal lobes. So memory, verbal processing, that's more so on the left side, which we're not really seeing too many issues with. How about facial recognition? You feel like if you meet someone and see it, yep. Emotional regulation, feel like you ever go?
Why would you ask me something like that?
You ever go 0 to 100 like real quick?
I'm pretty stable.
Yep. How about your navigation? You get lost?
No,
I'm
a good navigator.
Cool. Empathy. How about you find yourself like highly empathic or lacking empathy at times, or
depends on the situation.
Okay.
The question is, do I give a shit? If I give a shit, I'm pretty empathic.
Okay.
I think he's a normal, empathetic person.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to lean on Brent's analysis of me. He knows me well.
Yeah, I think he's good in all those areas, basically.
Yep. So, yeah, basically what we're seeing at that area, we're seeing a little bit of the delta being overactive. So that's indicating a moderate decrease in blood flow and oxygen to that right temporal lobe.
Okay.
So even though maybe all those functions are working well, they could work better if we're able to kind of retrain and improve blood flow to that area.
Cool.
What's also going on at that area is it's overproducing some of these faster frequencies. Actually, both temporal lobes, we're seeing T3 and T4 kind of getting lit up throughout the beta frequencies. So overactivity within beta, specifically within the temporal lobes, that can indicate sometimes anxiety, worry. It's interesting, like you mentioned, like light sleep or like waking up throughout the night.
Mm-hmm.
I think that could definitely be related to these guys staying pretty active. Because the overactivity, I mean, that's very common in terms of causing either difficulty falling asleep or staying asleep. So
I also have a gene when I did 23andMe, and I have what's called the night watcher gene, which is when, in tribes, there was someone who usually stayed awake at night to watch over the tribe. And apparently I have that gene. So it like just keeps me awake.
Interesting.
Which is very odd.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's a nighttime protector, I guess.
Huh. Then what we can also see here, you're kind of globally throughout your brain, you need a little bit more gamma. So gamma being that one that kind of facilitates neuroplasticity, helps different areas of the brain communicate.
Oh yeah, we're going to load up on that one. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
You're going to see the best gamma scores you've ever seen in your entire life.
Yeah, if we did this brain scan like a day tomorrow, maybe see something very different.
So gamma, so that would be different than, because that's a wave. Oh, touching all this oil in my head. It's different than like if you were to take GABA. Are they related or unrelated? Because GABA, the neurotransmitter.
Yeah, unrelated. GABA's more, so it's a good thing that you bring up though, because the neurotransmitters it's kind of like two sides of the same coin with like the neurotransmitters and the brainwaves. But GABA is more so like when you start producing more alpha and theta, that's like GABA, serotonin. When you're more in a beta brainwave pattern, that's like more dopaminergic. So it makes sense kind of with you. I mean, high achiever, motivated, focused. I mean, that's like a very classic, typical pattern that I see amongst clients, like high performers, where it's like a lot of overactivity. You don't even have as much overactivity as we'll typically see. A lot of clients I work with, they'll be like all lit up like red, orange throughout the.
I'm not that high of an achiever, turns out.
you whatever you're doing, you're managing your stress pretty well. It looks like. Let's see. So I'll show you next. So this is showing basically the left and right hemisphere, how they're working together. Mm-hmm. So this is detecting any asymmetry, meaning it's measuring the power, the magnitude of your different brain waves, and it's comparing what are called homologous sites. So like meaning like FP1 to FP2, F7 to F8. And it's evaluating to see, do you have stronger brain waves on the left hemisphere versus the right? Now, a sign of a really healthy nervous system is having good, healthy balance between left-right hemisphere where they're working well together. And what we see here, a lot of white is indicating normal, healthy amounts of connectivity.
Okay.
This one little thing, this really is not indicative of much. This is just very mild overactivity of alpha, the right hemisphere. Okay. It's not at all.
So look, because we only have a couple minutes left.
Yep.
So looking at this whole thing, I guess from a bird's eye view, from an expert perspective like yours, what would you say would be like the first thing, like the main thing that I should address or look at to optimize myself?
I mean, the two areas that are popping up the most, and what we already talked about, that right temporal lobe. I mean, I'm curious to dig, and maybe another time we'll dig a bit more into this, but it's kind of always based on like what would you really hope to be able to achieve in terms of like increasing your cognitive performance? Like, do you want more focus? You want more productivity? Like what are kind of the goals that we have?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think productivity, I feel pretty good on. I would like to chill more. I would like more relaxation, more of the slower brain waves.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think that would help optimize every other level as well. Because I can push hard on the work, but I don't know how to relax. Even when I want to relax and I sit there, my brain is going, how can I relax more productively? How can I chill while being productive? So I want to be able to just chill and not have to focus on the next thing that needs to be done.
Yep. So calming down a couple of those key areas is definitely going to help with that.
Okay.
So now it's like we kind of know for some people, that kind of like overactivity of the brain can occur like throughout the frontal lobes. Your frontal lobes look pretty even keeled here. For you, it's the temporal lobes, those guys that sit right above the ears, that those guys are really overfiring. So now that we know that, we can place the electrodes specifically at those locations to retrain and rewire, help those guys get more into the alpha and theta kind of slower brainwave patterns.
Cool.
Last thing, let's just take a look at connectivity. So this is basically looking at how different areas are communicating. On the left is hyperconnectivity, too much crosstalk between neural networks, which is a sign of like inefficient processing. And then on the right is hypo or underconnectivity. So basically this is showing you do have some of this where certain areas of the brain are not communicating to other areas as well as they could be. And that is likely caused because we see that overproduction of those beta waves, where it's like your brain, your nervous system's in that kind of go mode. So when you get more into the slower, kind of more meditative states, that actually allows increased connectivity within the brain to take place. So like specifically a lot of this, we're seeing like your frontal lobes, the way like especially your right prefrontal cortex, this guy right here. See how all the lines are kind of emanating from this location?
Right.
Or also this location F3, that's part of the left frontal lobe. So those guys are not communicating as well as they could be to all these neighboring locations.
Okay.
So by retraining those specific areas, not only does that help those areas of the brain perform optimally, but that also then allows those areas to communicate better with neighboring areas of the brain.
Awesome. It's super fascinating to see what's going on inside your head on such a analytical and clinical level. That's really fascinating. I want to spend more time with you and go over all of this. And I also want to do like another real scan soon.
Yep.
And do the full thing where we're not in a podcast studio with cameras and microphones to get like real, like, I'm sure this is accurate, but get it even more accurate.
Yep.
And then I'm sure Brent wants one too. So that would be super cool to go through that. But dude, thank you so much for coming, doing the brain scan. I learned a lot. Last thing, can you tell people like where to find you and how you can help them? Because I know you have a program where you can literally send an EEG to someone and they can have the same result and they can optimize themselves. So go ahead and like pimp yourself out a little bit.
Yep, you got it. So connect with me on Instagram. Neuroflex is probably the best way. Send me a message. Be curious to hear from all your audience. All right, if you guys are interested, connect with me on Instagram. Basically, the program that I offer is basically providing equipment that I can ship anywhere nationwide, worldwide. I have some clients now in Mexico and Canada where I can just directly ship it to them and then they can do brain scans on themselves and then actually do the neurofeedback, which we didn't get into. But neurofeedback is basically, retraining, rewiring the brain after we have this initial assessment. So to me, the coolest thing is being able to actually see the follow-up scans to be able to show you, hey, here is how your brain's looking right now. And then after a month of training, here's how the brain's actually changing and improving like on a functional level. So that's kind of my favorite part of doing, the virtual or just brain scans in general. But I basically do a kind of a holistic brain optimization program. So it's covering, nutrition, supplementation, nootropics. I'll kind of create like a curated protocol for each person based on what they're wanting to achieve, along with what their brain data is looking like. And then they're also using the neurotechnologies, retraining the brain. So I like to think of it like working out, where it's, you're not just bench pressing the whole time, you're benching, then you're, squatting, you're kind of hitting all these different ways of training your body. So I think in terms of training the brain, it's like all of these different things, your nutrition, your hydration, your exercise, the neurotechnologies, all this stuff's cool. But if you're not dialing in on the fundamentals, there's only a limited scope of improvement you're going to get. So I basically walk people through that whole process A to Z and coach them through the whole kind of brain optimization protocol.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for coming. I learned a lot.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yeah,
this was fun.
Yeah, dude. Fuck
Sweet.
yeah. Until next time, brother.
Absolutely.